how many iterations did it take you to finally feel comfortable with your final product?
So in terms of the design of the physical thing, or the software and the interactions, or which part of it?
From the side of the physical robot, right? So because
Yeah.
you're trying to really focus on how a patient is going to engage with
Mm-hmm.
this, and it's very important that a patient doesn't feel weird,
Right.
right? So how do you kind of go about, okay, well, this is where we started.
Mm-hmm.
This was okay. You know, obviously you had the blue trash bin, googly eyes, right? Then a Bluetooth speaker,
Yep.
right? And then it seems like it's slowly kind of built up over time. But there's a point where you say, okay, I have all the functioning components that I need, but now I'm going to change the design because the eye doesn't look quite right, or the head isn't quite the right shape. Like how did you go about making those types of decisions?
Sure.
What kind of testing did you do, like to a focus group? And then do you feel that right now you're at a stable point with your product?
Yeah, so with designing our Meibu robot for Catalia Health, we actually did a very fast process of designing that actual robot, right? Mm-hmm. So the really early stuff in terms of, the trash can, or, you can see the cardboard things behind us here, right? Those were really for testing more the user experience, not the actual design of the robot, right? And we deliberately separated these things out. The actual design of the robot from beginning to end took us about 4 to 5 weeks.
Wow.
All right, now we went with IDEO, a great design firm, worked with their San Francisco studio a few blocks from where we are now. So IDEO is actually one of the early investors in our company. We were startup in residence, so we spent 5 months working right in the middle of their studio. The industrial design process for this robot was, like I said, about 5 weeks. So we went in with, here is the design brief. The first week or so was, coming up with all sorts of crazy ideas, right? So taking that in many different directions, things that look, all different, designs and styles, and, some things that might be an appliance, some things that are like totally sci-fi, some things that there's, no way we could ever manufacture, right? But starting off with just this ideation phase. And from that, we started to narrow down, right? So let's get rid of the things that are just like totally weird and out there we don't think people would ever want. Let's get rid of things that, maybe we could manufacture, but it would cost us a whole lot of money, and as a startup, that's just not a good thing, right? And that left us, with a smaller set of things, and we started putting those in front of people, right? So I wouldn't say it's, particularly focus groups, but going out to places where we could interact with our potential patient population. So we help a lot of patients who tend to be older, not necessarily, tend to be dealing with chronic diseases, and so, putting some of these designs in front of people. Now, at first, that was stuff on paper, right? Drawings on the computer screen on paper, getting some quick feedback, and we tried to really rapidly iterate and narrow in on what might work. And so it's a combination of, feedback that we got from people, but also my experience of building stuff like this for the last 15 years, right, by the time we were doing that design. And so just an understanding then of what people are going to react to. So our design brief going into that was really simple. One, this needs to have eyes, right, because we know the power of this psychologically, right? Something that actually looks at you and makes eye contact while it's interacting is very important. Two, we wanted a screen on it. Speech technology is getting much better. Right, so this was, a couple of years ago, the Amazon Echo was out. Today we have, more devices like this from, Google and Apple and many other things that we can talk to. And it's definitely getting better. There's a lot more that you can do. But in healthcare, we need to make sure that we're always very accurate. So one of the things that we do on the robot is when she's speaking, she's showing what she's saying on the screen. I can respond by talking to her or pressing a button. And sometimes we might want to say, oh, hey, do you remember when your doctor showed you how to whatever, right? Can I show you that video again, right? So to be able to do things like that. So that was criteria number 2. And then point number 3 was we wanted this roughly the size of a kitchen appliance. Right? Now, we could build something that's humanoid, right? As big as you or me. Sure. It's going to take up a lot of space in our home, right? That's not great for a lot of people. We could make this the size of a cell phone, right? Possible, given the technology. It's going to get, put behind the bookshelf or tossed in the kitchen drawer. People are going to forget about it too easily. So it's kind of roughly the size. And so with that set of criteria, we were able to then hone in on some of these early designs and say, okay, here's the set of things that fit. Now, okay, we actually like this from this one, this from this one. Let's put those together. And so just a very rapid iteration process. Having a team of professional industrial designers who were focused on this project and able to really quickly iterate let us go from initial concept to basically what we have today in a period of about a month.
Was there any ever design or talk about having the robot look more lifelike?
So, looking lifelike in a robot can be good or bad, right? And that's a matter of perspective and opinion, I think. There are some parts of the world where people are really focused on designing robots that might look very humanoid. There's, this concept called the uncanny valley that I'm sure you're familiar with. And we really don't want to fall into the bottom of the uncanny valley, right? This thing that just ends up looking very creepy. Given what we're doing also, again, going back to where we position ourselves as a company in healthcare, we want to make sure we set up the right expectations, right? So uncanny valley is often talked about as the look of this thing, right? You don't want to look too humanoid. But there are also a lot of other expectations that come out of that, not just the appearance, but the overall interaction, right? So for the same reason that we don't try to make this look like a person, we don't make it sound like a person, right? And we want a very intelligible voice. So we have a computer-generated voice that's easy to understand, but is not human recorded speech. And also for similar reasons, we don't have completely open-ended conversations with this. The robot's always directing the conversation because we don't want to set up expectations with our patients that this can just talk about anything, right? You can just sit down and talk to it because then the expectations are too high. So, with that set of things, that helps us to start make these decisions about what this looks like, how humanoid should it be. If you look at our Maybu robot, it's you're never going to confuse this for a person, right? It's clearly yellow plastic, right? Or in the near future other colors as well, right? It has human-like features, right? It has eyes that are going to look at you. Obviously there's a head on there, but the rest of it's this squat body and a screen, right? So it's not like this looks just like a human, but enough of those features to really draw on the psychology of interaction, right? Something looks at me, I immediately look back, right? So using those types of things in the design are very important, but trying to make it look like a person, one is going to lead to the wrong expectations, and two is very expensive, right? Building a product like that starts to get really difficult to actually manufacture at scale.
For the same reason that you have the eyes that kind of look at you, was there a conscious decision to not make a mouth that moved as well? Because you do fall into that uncanny valley, even though it would be more of a computer synthesized or computer generated voice, right. That you were worried about the lips or the mouth kind of syncing up to the words and making sure.
So it's a combination of things, right? Doing that is really hard. And so that's one thing. And two, I challenge you to go find a robot out there that has moving lips that actually looks good, right? It always ends up being a little bit creepy. Right? Now, maybe there are some out there I haven't seen yet. There's a lot of people working on stuff like this right now, so it'd be great if there is. But I think for what we're doing, it doesn't necessarily add a lot of value to it. Right? People perceive this thing as talking to them, even though the mouth is a smile line embedded in the plastic. Right? It's not like there's anything there that moves or even opens. People have no problem talking to this and having a conversation. And what I've seen is, again, many robots out there do have moving lips. None of them kind of cross that threshold of not being creepy or just wrong, right? And many of them are now good enough that it's not like, ooh, that's weird, but there's this disconnect.
Sure.
Right, so uncanny comes from Freud's unheimlich, right? So this feeling that something's just not quite right. And through a lot of the studies that I did more than a decade ago, we found that many of the features that are not quite right like that, people aren't necessarily going to say, oh, that's wrong. Right, and be able to point that out and say this is a problem. But if you actually look at their experience with this robot and you compare one versus another, then in that underlying data about the psychology of the interaction, you can see these very clear differences. So part of it's just learning these lessons about what things work, what things don't, and then how do we apply those in the design of future robots.